Dear listeners, we're back with a new story. Get ready for cheating, revenge, and wild relationship drama. I remember the moment clearly. It was a Wednesday, like any other, except it wasn't. We just sat down for dinner, takeout from the Thai place down the street. Emma had ordered her usual, pad Thai with extra peanuts, but she barely touched it. I noticed because she always finished every bite, always scraped her plate clean like she didn't want to waste anything. That night, though, she pushed the food around, barely taking a forkful. The silence between us stretched on, thick and uncomfortable. I wanted to ask her what was wrong, but part of me already knew. I just wasn't prepared to hear it. James, she started, her voice small, almost lost in the clatter of my fork on the plate. I looked up, mid-bite, and saw her staring down at her hands, fiddling with her wedding ring. A nervous habit she'd developed over the years whenever something was on her mind. My stomach tightened. We need to talk. My first instinct was to make a joke, to lighten the mood, but I held back. There was something in her tone that told me this wasn't the time for humor. Okay, I said, setting my fork down. What's going on? She took a deep breath, as if she'd been rehearsing this moment in her head for a while, and finally looked up at me. Her eyes, usually so bright and full of life, were clouded with something I couldn't quite place. I've been thinking, she began, carefully choosing her words. And I don't think this is working anymore. I blinked, trying to process what she was saying. What do you mean? Our marriage, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not happy, James. And I don't think you are either. The words hit me like a freight train, but the thing that surprised me most was how calm I felt. It wasn't that I didn't care, it was more that a part of me had been waiting for this. There had been cracks for years, small at first, but growing wider with every passing argument, every silent night, every distant look. Emma, I started, unsure of what to say. Was I supposed to fight for us? To beg her to reconsider? But even as I opened my mouth, I realized I couldn't. She shook her head before I could continue. No, don't. I know what you're going to say. You're going to tell me we can fix this, that we can try harder, but the truth is, we've been trying for years, haven't we? I couldn't argue with that. She was right. We had been trying, if you could even call it that. But trying wasn't enough anymore. I don't know what else to do, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I don't want to live like this anymore, James. I don't want to feel like we're just existing together, like roommates. I looked at her then, really looked at her. The woman sitting across from me wasn't the same woman I'd married. Time had changed us both, years of work, stress, bills, and kids had worn us down. But underneath all of that, I still saw the woman I had fallen in love with. And that was the hardest part. I understand, I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. I think you're right. She blinked, clearly not expecting me to agree so easily. You do? Yeah, I said, leaning back in my chair, exhaling deeply. I mean, I haven't been happy either, Emma. I just didn't want to admit it. She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes, though she quickly wiped them away with the back of her hand. I didn't want it to come to this, you know. I wanted us to work. But it feels like we've lost each other somewhere along the way. I know, I replied, my heart heavy. It feels like we've been on autopilot for so long, I don't even remember the last time we actually talked like this. There was a long pause as the weight of everything settled between us. It was surreal, sitting across from the person I'd shared my life with, knowing that the life we had built together was unraveling. Yet, in that moment, I couldn't bring myself to feel anger or bitterness. Only a deep, aching sadness. So, what happens now? I asked, not entirely sure I wanted to know the answer. I think we need to figure out what's next, she said, her voice steadying. I don't want this to be ugly. I don't want us to hate each other. But I think divorce is the right step for both of us. Divorce. There it was, the word hanging in the air, final and unyielding. I nodded slowly, trying to keep my emotions in check. I didn't feel the urge to argue or lash out. Instead, there was a strange sense of relief, like we'd both been waiting for someone to finally say what needed to be said. "Okay," I said softly. "If that's what you want, then I think it's the right thing to do." Emma stared at me, her eyes searching mine for something, though I wasn't sure what. She seemed almost surprised by how calmly I had taken the news. "I didn't expect you to agree so quickly," she admitted. I shrugged, feeling the weight of years lift from my shoulders, even if just a little. "Maybe I've known for a while, deep down. I just didn't want to face it." She nodded again, looking down at her hands. "I'm sorry, James. I really am." "Me too," I said, and I meant it. I wasn't angry, not at her, not at myself. Just sad that it had come to this. For a long time, we sat in silence, the room filled with the unspoken acknowledgement of the end. Neither of us touched our food. Neither of us cried. It was as if we were both mourning something we'd already lost long ago. The days that followed our conversation were strange, like living in a house made of glass, fragile, transparent, and vulnerable to the smallest tremor. Emma and I moved around each other cautiously, as if we both knew we were handling something precious that had already begun to shatter. We didn't talk much, only when necessary, and when we did, it was almost exclusively about logistics. How we would split our finances. What we'd tell our friends. How we would handle the house. It was unnerving how calm we both were, like two people who had made peace with their defeat. The tension between us wasn't hostile, just empty. We slept in the same bed, but the space between us felt like miles. One evening, after Emma had been out for a few hours at her sister's place, I found myself sitting on the couch, flipping through old photo albums. There we were, smiling and young, caught in a world that seemed so much simpler. Our wedding, our first apartment, the vacations we'd taken when everything was still exciting. I lingered on a photo of us at a beach in Mexico, Emma's hair wild from the wind, her smile wide as she leaned into me. We looked so happy. I barely heard her when she came through the door, but when she spoke, I almost jumped. "Hey," I looked up, startled, and saw her standing in the doorway, her coat still on, a bag in her hand. Her face was soft, contemplative. "Hey," I replied, setting the album aside. "You just get back." She nodded, stepping inside and kicking off her shoes. "Yeah, I was at Marie's longer than I planned." We got caught up talking. "Everything okay?" I asked. She paused, looking at me for a moment. "Yeah. Just, a lot to think about." I could hear the weight behind her words, the quiet exhaustion that came with processing what we were going through. We hadn't had a real conversation since the night she asked for the divorce, and it seemed like the silence between us was growing heavier with each passing day. "I've been thinking too," I admitted, gesturing for her to join me on the couch. She hesitated, then walked over and sat down, though there was a noticeable gap between us. "I'm not going to pretend like I didn't see this coming," I continued, looking down at my hands. I guess we've both known for a while that this was where things were headed. But I still hate that it came to this." Emma sighed, her shoulders slumping as she rested her elbows on her knees. "I hate it too, James. I didn't want this. I didn't want us to fall apart. We've been falling apart for a while, haven't we?" I said, almost to myself. "It's like we just stopped trying somewhere along the way. Or maybe we didn't even know how to try." Emma stayed quiet for a moment, and then she spoke, her voice low. "I feel like we stopped being a team. We became two people living parallel lives, not even noticing when we drifted further away." I nodded, feeling the truth in her words. "Yeah, that's exactly it. We stopped being us, and I guess we didn't know how to find our way back." She looked over at me then, her eyes filled with regret. "I don't want this to be ugly, James. I don't want to hate each other or fight. We've been through too much for that." "I don't want that either," I said, meeting her gaze. "I want this to be as amicable as possible, for both of us." If divorce is what you really want, I won't fight you on it. I'll sign whatever I need to. I just want us to end things with dignity, if that makes sense." Emma's expression softened. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means a lot to me." We sat there in silence, both of us lost in thought. It was strange to think that after all the years of marriage, we were now talking about ending it in such a calm, rational way. There were no angry outbursts, no slamming doors or harsh words. It was like we had both silently agreed that we were tired of the fighting, tired of the tension. We just wanted peace. "Do you think," Emma began, but stopped herself. "What? Do you think we could have done something differently?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Do you think we missed a chance to fix this?" I thought about her question for a moment, letting it settle before I answered. "Maybe," I said slowly. "But I think we were both too stuck in our own frustrations to see a way out. Maybe we didn't know how to fix it, or maybe we just didn't want to admit how far gone we were." She nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. "I feel like such a failure. I feel like I failed you, failed our marriage." I reached over, placing my hand on hers, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't pull away. "You didn't fail me, Emma. And I didn't fail you. Sometimes, things just fall apart, no matter how hard we try. That doesn't make us bad people. It just makes us human." She squeezed my hand, and we sat there, holding on to each other, both of us knowing that this was the end of something we had once held so dear. There were no grand apologies or promises to do better. Just the quiet acceptance that we had both reached the same conclusion, that our marriage, once full of love and laughter, was no longer salvageable. The next morning, we sat down at the kitchen table, coffee mugs between us, and talked about the practical things. How we'd tell our friends and families. What we'd do with the house. How we'd split our finances. It felt surreal, like we were planning someone else's life, not our own. "I think we should sell the house," Emma suggested, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "It's too big for either of us to live in alone." "I agree," I replied, staring down into my coffee. "We can split the profits and use that to start fresh." She nodded, looking relieved that we were on the same page. "I'll call the realtor next week. We'll get it listed." "Yeah, okay." There was a pause, and then she said, "What are we going to tell people?" "Our friends, I mean." I shrugged, feeling a lump form in my throat. "The truth, I guess. That we drifted apart, and it's nobody's fault." She gave a small, sad smile. "Yeah. I guess that's all we can say." I wanted to tell her that I would miss her, that despite everything, I still cared about her, but the words felt heavy and out of place. Instead, I just reached out and touched her hand, briefly. She looked up at me, her eyes full of unshed tears. "We'll get through this," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure if I believed it myself. "We will," she whispered, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. We didn't know what the future held, but for now, we were both ready to accept that the end was near. And maybe, just maybe, that was okay. It had been a month since the decision to end our marriage, and the house was alive with the sounds of packing. Boxes piled high in every corner of the living room, remnants of our life together, photos, trinkets, books, sorted into what we would keep, what we would sell, and what we would throw away. I stood in the middle of the chaos, trying to decide whether to keep a battered coffee table that had been a wedding gift from my parents. It had seen better days, but there was something comforting about its worn edges. Just as I was about to set it aside, Emma walked in, a box in her hands. "Are you keeping that?" she asked, nodding toward the coffee table. "I'm not sure yet." "It's familiar," I replied, a hint of nostalgia creeping into my voice. "But it doesn't really fit where I'm headed, does it?" She glanced at the table, then back at me. "No, probably not. But it feels like part of our story, you know." "Yeah," I said, feeling a pang in my chest. "I guess it is." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of shared memories settling heavily in the air. The laughter, the arguments, the late-night conversations, all of it tangled together in that simple piece of furniture. I think I'm going to let it go, I finally said, pulling my gaze away from it. It's time for something new. Emma nodded, a bittersweet smile touching her lips. New beginnings and all that. Right, I said, trying to lighten the mood. Maybe I'll replace it with a sleek, modern piece that has no emotional attachment. She chuckled softly, and it felt good to share a moment of levity amidst the heaviness. You'll have to invite me over for a housewarming when you do. Definitely. I'll make sure to pick out a couch that's not too comfortable so you don't overstay your welcome. Ha! As if I would ever do that, she teased, her smile widening. We exchanged a few more laughs before returning to the task at hand. As the days went on, I found myself settling into the rhythm of single life, an odd blend of liberation and uncertainty. I started going out more, reconnecting with friends I had neglected during the years of our marriage. One Friday night, I found myself at a bar downtown with a couple of friends from work. The atmosphere was lively, a mix of laughter and clinking glasses, and it felt good to be out. I sat at the bar nursing a beer, surrounded by familiar faces, but there was a nagging sense of emptiness I couldn't shake. James, shouted Eric, a coworker, as he approached me with a grin. You made it. I was starting to think you'd become a hermit after the divorce. Thanks for the vote of confidence, I said, rolling my eyes, but I couldn't help but smile back. It's good to be out. About time you got back in the game. How's the house stuff going? He asked, plopping down on the stool next to mine. Getting there. Just trying to figure out what I want to do next, I replied, swirling the beer in my glass. Got any plans? Any new hobbies? He asked, clearly hoping to encourage me to embrace this new chapter of my life. I shrugged. Not yet. Just trying to take things one step at a time. Maybe travel a bit. Travel sounds good. You should hit up Costa Rica or something. Sun, surf, and plenty of adventures, Eric suggested enthusiastically. Yeah, that could be nice, I replied, but the thought of going somewhere new felt daunting. I had spent so much time in my comfort zone, and now the idea of venturing out alone was both thrilling and terrifying. As the night wore on, I caught sight of a woman across the bar. She had long brown hair and was laughing with a group of friends. Something about her energy drew me in, and I felt a spark of interest I hadn't experienced in a long time. But as I contemplated getting up the nerve to approach her, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Emma. Just wanted to check in. How are you doing? I stared at the message, feeling a mix of emotions. It was strange to still feel connected to her, even after everything. I took a deep breath and responded. I'm good. Just out with some friends. You? A moment later, my phone buzzed again. Doing okay. Just finished packing up the last of my stuff. I felt a pang of sympathy for her. I can't believe you're really doing it, I murmured to myself. I shot back a quick response. You'll be fine. We both will. Just as I was about to put my phone away, a reply came in. Thank you for being so understanding. I appreciate it. I felt a warmth in my chest at her words. I wanted to reassure her that we would be okay, even if it took time. As the night wrapped up, I found myself thinking about new beginnings. The next day, I texted Emma. Hey, do you want to grab coffee tomorrow? I think we should talk about the next steps. A few minutes passed before I received a response, sure. I'd like that. The next day, we met at a small cafe. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the small tables scattered around. Hey, Emma said, her voice warm but cautious as she sat down across from me. Hey, I replied, a slight smile breaking through the tension. You look good, thanks. You too, she said, her eyes searching mine for a hint of what I was feeling. I thought it would be good for us to check in, I said, stirring my coffee. To see how we're both doing. Yeah, I think that's a good idea, she replied, leaning forward slightly. I've been feeling a bit lost, to be honest. I nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Me too. It's hard to adjust to all this change. Do you think you'll stay in town? She asked, curiosity flashing in her eyes. For now, I think so. But who knows? Maybe I'll end up traveling after all. I could use a little adventure, I said, trying to keep the mood light. Just promise you'll take care of yourself, she said, genuine concern etched on her face. I don't want to see you lose yourself in all this. I chuckled, trying to brush off her concern. I'll be fine, I promise. Besides, I've got Eric looking out for me. Emma laughed softly, but then her expression turned serious again. James, I want you to know that I truly appreciate how we've handled everything. I don't want us to lose what we had, even if it's different now. I feel the same way, I admitted. I don't want us to hate each other. We've been through too much for that. As we talked, I realized how much I missed the ease of our conversations, the way we could discuss anything and everything without judgment. It felt comforting, like a warm blanket on a cold day. Do you think we could stay friends? She asked, hesitantly. Yeah, I think so. It might take some time, but I believe we can get there, I replied, feeling a sense of hope blossoming within me. Emma smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face. Good. I'd like that. With each passing moment, the heaviness of the past began to lift, replaced by a sense of possibility. We were standing at the precipice of something new, new lives, new experiences, and maybe, just maybe, a new friendship that would allow us to cherish the good memories while moving forward. As we finished our coffee, I felt lighter. The conversation had opened up a door that I hadn't realized was closed, and it felt good to breathe again. There was something powerful about accepting the end, but also embracing new beginnings. Life was still waiting for us, and I was finally ready to step into it. Weeks passed after our coffee meeting, and as the initial shock of the divorce faded, Emma and I fell into a tentative routine. We maintained regular communication, checking in with each other about our respective journeys and navigating our new lives. The connection we shared began to feel less like a tether pulling us back and more like a lifeline, a reminder that even though our marriage had ended, our history still mattered. One afternoon, as I sifted through my work emails, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Hey, I'm going to the farmer's market this Saturday. Want to join me? I hesitated, torn between the urge to maintain my independence and the desire to reconnect with her. I typed a response, then deleted it, unsure of how to express what I was feeling. Finally, I settled on a simple reply, sure, sounds good. What time? 10 a.m. She responded, and I could practically feel her smile through the screen. Saturday arrived, and the sun cast a golden glow over the city. As I approached the market, the vibrant colors of fresh fruits and vegetables greeted me, mingling with the earthy aroma of baked goods and flowers. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and nervousness. I hadn't seen Emma in a few weeks, and the idea of spending time together felt both exhilarating and daunting. Hey, you made it. Emma called out as she spotted me weaving through the crowd. She wore a light summer dress that danced around her knees, and her hair fell loosely over her shoulders, framing her face in a way that made her look both carefree and radiant. Hey! I replied, trying to match her energy as I approached. You look great, thanks. You too, very casual but stylish, she teased, her eyes sparkling. Just trying to blend in with the locals, I joked, gesturing to the bustling market around us. Let's go see what they have, she said, grabbing my hand and pulling me toward a stall overflowing with colorful produce. As we walked through the market, we slipped easily into conversation, exchanging playful banter about the various stalls. I marveled at how comfortable it felt to be with her again. It was as if the time apart had given us both a fresh perspective. Look at these tomatoes. They're practically glowing, Emma exclaimed, picking one up and holding it to the light. We should make a caprese salad. You'll impress any potential dates with your culinary skills. I laughed, shaking my head. I'll be honest, my cooking repertoire is mostly limited to microwavable meals and takeout. Ah, the classics, she replied, grinning. I'll have to teach you a few things. You know, it's never too late to learn. I raised an eyebrow playfully. Is that an invitation? Absolutely, she said, her laughter infectious. Consider it a friendly offer. We continued exploring the market, stopping at various stalls to sample cheese, bread, and local honey. Each taste seemed to ignite a memory, a shared picnic, a dinner party gone awry, and moments of laughter that had once filled our home. After gathering a few items, we settled on a bench, enjoying the sun's warmth and the food we had bought. The atmosphere buzzed with laughter and chatter, creating a backdrop of normalcy that felt comforting. Do you remember the first time we went to the farmer's market? Emma asked, her eyes far away in thought. Of course. You insisted on trying every sample until I thought we'd burst, I recalled, chuckling. I think we spent more on cheese than on actual groceries that day. She laughed, shaking her head. And you were so annoyed. But you loved it. You couldn't stop talking about how good that brie was for weeks. Okay, guilty as charged. I still think about it sometimes, I admitted, a smile tugging at my lips. You always had a knack for making mundane things fun. Emma's gaze softened, and for a moment, we both fell quiet, absorbing the weight of her words. I could feel the warmth of connection rekindling between us, an ember buried under the ashes of our past. James, she said, breaking the silence. I've been thinking a lot about us. About how we used to connect. I miss that. I miss it too, I admitted, my heart racing. I didn't realize how much until we started talking again. It feels good to laugh together. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. Do you think we could? I don't know, try to be friends. Like, real friends? I would like that, I replied earnestly. I think we owe it to ourselves to see where this can go. We have a lot of history, and I don't want to lose that. Emma smiled, a genuine spark in her eyes. Me neither. Maybe we can rediscover who we are, individually and together, without the pressure of being married. As we talked, it became clear that our past did not have to dictate our future. The walls that had once divided us were slowly beginning to crumble, and with each shared memory and laugh, we rebuilt a foundation of understanding and friendship. The weeks that followed became a beautiful exploration of rediscovery. We spent time together, going to the cinema, trying new restaurants, and even cooking together in the kitchen of her new apartment. I was amazed at how effortless our interactions felt. It was as if we were picking up a book we had put down long ago, and the pages still resonated with familiarity. One evening, as we chopped vegetables for a stir-fry, Emma turned to me with a curious expression. Do you remember our relationship check-in nights? I laughed, recalling the rituals we had when things got tough. How could I forget? You'd always come armed with a list of topics to discuss. It felt like a business meeting. Hey, those meetings kept us grounded, she defended playfully. But seriously, do you think we could do something like that again? Just to check in on how we're doing as friends. Sure, I said, grinning. But I want to add a twist, no lists, just honest, open conversation. Let's keep it casual. Deal, she replied, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. As we settled into this new friendship, I started to notice little things, Emma's laughter, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her passions, the kindness in her gestures. It was as if the dust had settled, and I could finally see her for who she truly was, beyond the role of my wife. One evening, while sharing a glass of wine on her couch, I looked at her and said, you know, I'm really glad we're doing this. I feel like I'm getting to know you all over again. Me too, she replied softly, her gaze steady. I think we're both learning how to be ourselves, independent of each other, and that's important. Agreed. It feels refreshing to explore this new dynamic, I said, taking a sip of my wine. I think it's helping me heal. Emma reached over, squeezing my hand lightly. You deserve to be happy, James. We both do. That night, as we talked and laughed, I felt a warmth growing in my chest, a flicker of hope that our story wasn't over, just evolving. And as the evening drew to a close, I realized that rediscovering each other wasn't just about revisiting the past, it was about embracing the future. We were no longer just a married couple, but two individuals forging a new path, navigating the complexities of friendship while cherishing the bond that would always connect us. With each passing day, I felt more and more certain that this new beginning held the promise of something beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, I felt excited about what lay ahead.